Earth recently hit 8 billion people. In 1800, that number was 1 billion, which means that in the last 225 years, we've added 7 billion people. While this growth was connected to a variety of technological evolutions, there is a debate about whether Earth is overpopulated or underpopulated. What is the correct assumption? Let's explore this debate in the latest episode. Until around 12,000 years ago, humans were pretty much hunters and gatherers, ones who foraged off the land and moved from place to place as nomadic tribes. A major turning point was the agricultural revolution around 10,000 years ago, when humans shifted from hunting and gathering to farming, leading to permanent settlements, population growth, and the rise of civilizations. This was connected to the Earth coming out of the last ice age, warming the planet and allowing humans to start farming. This transformation laid the foundation for technological advancements, from the Industrial Revolution to the digital age, enabling rapid communication, exploration, and innovation. From the 18th century and afterwards, human populations began to dramatically increase, leading to concern even at that time period. Thomas Malthus, an 18th century economist, argued that population growth would eventually outpace food production, leading to widespread famine, disease, and societal collapse. Malthus believed that natural checks such as war, famine, and disease would curb overpopulation, and he advocated for more restraint such as delayed marriage and reduced birth rates to prevent catastrophe. However, so far, his assessment has proven to be wrong, as since his grim prediction, the world population has risen sevenfold. While there have been famines and starvation events, virtually all of them have been localized and associated with geopolitical problems rather than overpopulation or physical limitations. But is there a possibility that Malthus might have foreshadowed the far future, where Earth will reach its carrying capacity? Some people, known as Neo-Malthusians, believe that if we don't bring down birth rates, the world will suffer from a catastrophic increase in death rates. Then there are the technocentrist optimists who believe that human initiative and technological advancements can solve most challenges, including those related to population growth. Who's right and who's wrong? Well, both of them do have valid points. As of 2024, the worldwide birth rate is 17 births per 1,000 of the population, and the death rate is 7.9 deaths per 1,000 of the population, adjusting to a total population increase of 1.03%. Another gauge, the total fertility rate, measures how many babies a woman will have during her childbearing years, and the worldwide average is 2.26. 2.1 is what the number needs to be over to have a population increase, and not all nations are created equal in that way. Of the nations with the highest total fertility rates, 19 out of the 20 highest are in sub-Saharan Africa, with Nigeria having the highest rate at 6.67. Many of these nations are also considered developing and are among the poorest in the world. Meanwhile, there are nations that have extremely low total fertility rates, with Taiwan, an East Asian island nation in the South China Sea, having the lowest at only 1.11. Most of the nations with a total fertility rate lower than the 2.1 replenishment number are developed and industrialized. According to current projections, the world is estimated to reach 9.6 billion people by 2050 and a peak population of 10.8 billion by 2100. This likely means that even fast-growing poorer nations will eventually see lowering birth rates and total fertility rates. This also means that the 22nd century may be the first century since the 14th century to see a worldwide population decrease. The debate over whether the world needs more or less people is complicated. In the last few decades, there has been a concern about how a higher world population may create environmental problems such as climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, and a stress on natural resources. Much of the current population growth is occurring in poor developing countries within Africa, poor Middle Eastern nations, and parts of South Asia. India recently became the population king, surpassing China with 1,420,000,000 people. As a nation, India has a birth rate of 16.2 and a death rate of 9.1, signaling some growth, but its total fertility rate is 2.03, just below the 2.1 replenishment rate. This means that India will eventually see a population stagnation and may even start to see a decrease later in the 21st century. However, due to its current massive population, there are problems. For one, India receives 76% of its electricity from fossil fuels, and the majority of vehicles are running off gasoline or diesel. And with the lack of adequate emission standards, produce vast amounts of pollution. India's western and eastern neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh, have similar demographical statistics, coupled with high populations. And both also create lots of pollution. In fact, East and South Asian nations make up 56% of the world population, and many have high populations, thus contributing to added environmental degradation. Then there are the nations that are currently experiencing population stagnation or decline. All are considered industrialized and developed and include Canada and the United States, all of Europe, East Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. Although all of these regions are experiencing a population slowdown, some are pronounced. European nations such as Italy, Germany, Poland, and Portugal, and East Asian nations such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan have seen a population decrease in the last decade. In fact, Japan and Italy have amongst the highest median ages worldwide, 50 and 48.4 respectively. Both share similar demographical dynamics and will likely see further population changes. But Japan also has very limited migration, being homogeneously Japanese. That, coupled with low total fertility rates, means that Japan has a current projected 2100 population of 63 million, half of its high. Even China is seeing lowering total fertility rates, with its current being 1.55, and by 2100, the nation is projected to have 800 million people. The United States, a nation of immigrants, is still growing thanks to migration, but the nation is expected to see a slowdown or reduction by the later 21st century. Population growth or decreases can be both beneficial and problematic. For developing nations, rapid population increases definitely create strains on social services such as education and healthcare. And to add insult to injury, these services are already subpar. Back in the old days, when European nations were developing, the British government transported convicts to North America and later to Australia as a way to reduce prison overcrowding and remove what they considered undesirable elements from society. Obviously, these draconian measures are not going to be done today and shouldn't. One way developing nations today alleviate their population is by voluntary immigration. Young individuals living in poorer countries often go to more developed countries for educational and work opportunities, and the nations they're going to are usually the ones that have internal population decreases occurring, particularly European nations. This migration does help increase the populations of European nations, but other societal issues arise from them, including cultural differences. A majority of European nations are Christian and secular, while the migrants arriving there are African or Middle Eastern Muslims. This leads to the debate of multiculturalism versus nativism. Some Europeans embrace cultural infusion, while others are against it or wary of it. Muslims who live in European nations tend to want to retain their religious fundamentalism and are less prone to assimilate than other migrants. Yet, any migrant for that matter in Europe is seen as being an asset to fill jobs. There are some nations in Europe that have limited migration, such as Poland, which has amongst the lowest total fertility rates in the world. But Poland's government and many Poles support keeping the nation ethnically homogeneous. So, Poland has introduced several policies to encourage higher birth rates, most notably the 500 Plus program, which provides families with the monthly payment of 500 zlotys. The government has also introduced additional tax breaks for families, subsidized childcare, and maternity leave policies to make raising children more affordable. Outside of Europe, Japan has implemented various incentives to combat its declining birth rate, including cash payments for newborns and subsidies for childcare and education. Parental leave policies have been expanded, with fathers encouraged to make more time off, and daycare facilities have been increased to support working parents. However, these policies aren't working as they should, as young Japanese struggle with high living costs, job insecurity, and long working hours, making it difficult for young adults to afford raising a family. This not only affects Japan, but other rich industrialized nations like the United States. While American total fertility rates are on the higher side for industrialized nations, it's still lowering every year. Millennials born between 1981 and 1996 and Zoomers born between 1997 and 2012 face similar economic challenges which deter them from having children. Raising a child in the US today is increasingly expensive, with the average cost from birth to age 18 exceeding $300,000, not including college tuition. Childcare alone can rival mortgage payments, with daycare costs averaging over $10,000 a year. Housing, healthcare, and education expenses continue to rise, while stagnant wages and high inflation makes it harder for families to keep up. Many parents also struggle with work-life balance, as paid parental leave is limited and quality childcare options can be scarce. In addition, due to the aging US population, more and more of the federal budget is funding Social Security and Medicare, with both programs costing $3 trillion a year. Younger workers are now paying more for both programs, with the possibility that they may be defunct by the time they retire. If somehow the total fertility rate did start increasing in the next decade, this may lead to a clash between an internally growing population and an aging population, creating more financial difficulties. Although the human population is still rising worldwide, there are some concerns that may slow it down. One concern is the rise of new pathogens. In the last couple of decades, there have been some threats, ones that have been localized and others that have become worldwide threats. In October 2014, Eric Duncan, a Liberian national, was diagnosed with Ebola in Dallas, Texas, after traveling from Liberia. He later died on October 8th, and the two nurses who treated him also contracted the virus, making it the first ever cases of Ebola transmission within the US. Ebola is generally a bloodborne virus that usually spreads slowly through bodily fluids, but it has a high fatality rate, generally between 25 to 50%. If somehow Ebola became airborne, it would be a dangerous situation, leading to many deaths. But the good news is that it's an RNA virus, meaning it can mutate, but its method of transmission, through direct contact with bodily fluids, has remained consistent throughout its known history. 6 years later, in March of 2020, COVID-19 became a global pandemic. But this virus was connected to a new novel coronavirus that emerged in China in late 2019. Unlike Ebola, COVID-19 spread rapidly through airborne transmission, including aerosols and respiratory droplets. Initially, COVID-19 was deadly, especially for elderly people and ones with compromised immune systems, leading to governments worldwide to implement lockdowns to prevent the spread. While it was deadly, the overall fatality rate was around 1%, which, while not very high, is significantly higher than the seasonal flu, which has a fatality rate of around 0.1%. The other concern about COVID-19 was its origins, as there has been some evidence that it spread from a Wuhan, China lab. Nevertheless, whether this was accidental or intentional, it may prove that man-made viruses can spark new epidemics and pandemics, which may adversely affect humans. The newest concern is the H5N1 avian influenza outbreak, which continues to impact both the United States and the global community. In the US, there have been around 67 confirmed human cases, primarily among individuals with direct exposure to infected birds or livestock. There is some concern about H5N1 mutating and potentially becoming more spreadable, but hopefully that threat remains low. Geopolitically, there is a concern about nuclear war. Nuclear warheads were only used once in human history at the end of World War II, when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. After World War II, while there were tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, nuclear weapons served as a deterrent to nuclear war under the principle of mutually assured destruction. This doctrine suggests that if 2 nuclear-armed nations were to go to war, both would suffer catastrophic consequences, discouraging either side from initiating a nuclear strike. A full-scale nuclear war would lead to millions, if not billions, of direct deaths and millions of indirect deaths from radiation poisoning. Thus, this grim prospect would lead to a significant human die-off. Theoretically, there are varying estimates on how many people the Earth can support. Most say between 9 and 10 billion, but one high estimate is 280 billion. If 10 billion is correct, we are going to pass that by 2100 when the world population is projected to reach 10.8 billion. If the world did reach 280 billion people, the planet would have an average population density of nearly 5,000 people per square mile, equivalent to Bahrain. This would obviously put a huge stress on biodiversity, creating more deforestation and habitat loss, as well as less green space for people to enjoy. The only way to increase Earth's carrying capacity is modernization, which has increased significantly in the last century. Technology has brought the world to where it's at today, with increased life expectancies, lowering infant mortality rates, and the modern luxuries we take for granted, especially in industrialized nations. If technology does further increase, which will likely happen in the next 100 years, it's very possible that the Earth will be able to support more people. The current trend towards lowering total fertility rates isn't connected to a physical limitation, but rather to societal pressures and a shift in social and lifestyle priorities, including a focus on prioritizing careers, education, or personal growth. Around the world, there are proponents to increasing birth rates, with one of the most vocal being Elon Musk. Musk has warned that low total fertility rates could lead to societal collapse and is a father of 12 children. But he's worth $200 billion, and it would be incredibly difficult for the average American family to raise and support that many children. Pope Francis has criticized declining birth rates, especially in Western countries, calling it a demographic winter and advocating for families to have children. Generally, religious communities tend to have higher birth rates compared to secular populations. For example, Israel is considered a highly developed industrialized nation, but it has an unusually high total fertility rate of 2.92. This is associated with the ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities there, which tend to have large families. Although the United States has an average total fertility rate of 1.84, the Mormon community of Utah has a total fertility rate of 2.6. And many predominantly Muslim nations in North Africa, parts of the Middle East, and Central Asia have total fertility rates ranging between 2 and 4. Another debate is that will there be a future need for more people due to technological advancements? Maybe not. In the last 50 years, there has been a push to industrial automation, which has led to less of a need for factory workers. This automation has been pushed to commercial businesses in some way or form. In December of 2022, McDonald's unveiled a largely automated restaurant in Fort Worth, Texas, aiming to enhance efficiency and reduce human interaction in the ordering process. In China and Japan, automated services are even more popular and are being implemented into everyday tasks. If automation continues to increase, there will be less of a need for human employees. Another change has been artificial intelligence. AI is increasingly replacing human workers by automating repetitive and predictable tasks across various industries. Some have said that soon, some jobs may be exclusively done by AI, creating less of a need for people to do them. If automation and AI increase, there may not be as much of a concern for declining populations. But there are negatives. Automation can also lead to a loss of human touch in customer service, making interactions feel impersonal. Additionally, AI systems are prone to technical failures, cyber vulnerabilities, and biases that can impact decision making. and humans are needed to fix these failures. There's no doubt that the world population will eventually stagnate and decrease, but when it will happen is debatable depending on many variables. The current estimate is around 2100, 75 years from now. That's still a long time, and even after that, the world population isn't just going to drop like a rock, it will likely take hundreds of years to see visible differences. Even in industrialized nations with currently low total fertility rates, it will still take time for populations to fall. The fact of the matter is that ultimately, humans are going to go extinct. But from what? An extraterrestrial impact? Nuclear war? Or from ourselves? More likely, extinction will occur from something physically and socially triggered, and not from low total fertility rates. Hopefully, for humanity, that extinction date is in the far and distant future. The current world population of 8 billion people is still practical and not of a huge concern. Pretty much, societally, it's an individual's choice to have or not have children. And either way, right now, it's not going to make much of a difference to whether Earth will be overpopulated or underpopulated. But that's my opinion. Do you think that Earth is over or underpopulated? I'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave your comment in the comment section below. That concludes this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like learning about the Earth, this is a channel to watch, so be sure to subscribe to my channel, Our World Upon Our Home, to view more videos. Until next time!